Hi, this is Luca Prado. I am a career and life coach, and you're listening to Paid Vocation. In this podcast, I'll be sharing real stories of people who are doing work they love to help you find work that you love, whether that's a new role at your current company, switching careers completely, or starting a business. And if you're already doing work that you love, this podcast will be a place that you can come back to feel supported and uplifted. Thank you so much for listening. Assia, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That's a great question. I had lots of things, as all kids do, when I was young about wanting to be what I wanted to be when I grew up. But for me, one of my main things was I wanted to be like my dad. He still is a physician, and I just wanted to be like him. He was my mentor, what I looked up to like when I was young, and I was like, I want to be like my dad. And what I didn't realize was he was actually in the entrepreneurship side of being a physician. So for me, all I knew was I'm going to be like him when I grow up. And what I saw was doctor. And so I always used to say that out loud. But as I grew up, I started to realize, wait a minute, he's a lot more than that. And so that's the footsteps I started to follow in as I got older.
And tell me, you kind of alluded to it. How does that connect to what you do today?
So for me, my biggest thing was I wanted to get into business, right? I wanted to be an entrepreneur because what I saw with my dad was he was able to bring a sense of community in every venture that he did. He was part of the community. He was employing people in the community, providing livelihood, providing services to people that needed them. And he was really making a difference through his entrepreneurship. And so for me, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I thought it was on the healthcare side. I always thought, I'm going to go into the healthcare field. As you know, my sister is a dentist. So I always assumed I'd be kind of on that side. But over time, I started to change my thoughts on what I wanted to do and ended up in the childcare industry. My daughter was born, and I just fell in love with the idea of a childcare center, became obsessed with it, and found myself being able to get into the field. We purchased a childcare center in Plano. But for me, that played into exactly what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to be able to provide a service for the community, be a part of the community, employ people, provide livelihood for these people. And I'm able to do that with what I'm doing now.
Did you graduate from college and go straight into it? Like, what was the path to figuring out that this is what you wanted and then actually doing it?
So my path is like not linear in any way. I graduated college with the anticipation of getting into dental school, which I did not get into dental school. So I decided to come up with a contingency plan. And my contingency plan was chiropractic school, which I truly enjoyed. I loved the field. I went to chiropractic school, graduated, started a job as a chiropractor. And then it was funny, my dad had just started a new business. He opened a hospital out in Lancaster, Texas, which is not
Wow.
far from downtown where I was living. And it was a big venture. He's a physician. He had gotten into the entrepreneurial side of it. And he was like, this is a bigger venture than I anticipated. I need people around me that I can trust. Would you want to come out here and work with me? And for me, like working with my dad was the dream. So I thought, yeah, I could do that. And we talked about, once we get settled in the hospital, I could probably, open something for my chiropractic clinic in the same vicinity so that we would work together, and then I'd be able to open my own business on the side of that. But we continued to work together, and then I worked with him on a couple of other ventures, and that's when I got pregnant while I was working for him in his home health and hospice agency. I just really enjoyed working with my dad. It was something that I looked up to him always, and I loved who he was as a leader. I loved being able to learn from him and be able to experience everything that I could. Not a lot of people get that kind of firsthand view into entrepreneurship,
Sure.
and I was able to have that. So to me, that was super important. But when I got pregnant with my daughter, I just assumed I didn't have any idea of what I was going to do for childcare. I just assumed I would hire a nanny, or maybe my mom would help or something. And then as I was getting closer to wanting to go back to work after I had her, I was interviewing nannies, and it wasn't fitting. And I know there's tons of great nannies out there, and a lot of people have had great experiences, but I just couldn't find someone that I could trust alone with my child. It just wasn't well with me. And just for the sake of due diligence, there was a Primrose facility next door to our office building. Like our conference room looked over at the playground. So it was literally right next door. So I was like, let me just check it out and see. And I fell in love with the concept. I just absolutely loved that there was accountability. They were licensed by the state. There was structure. There was curriculum. There's multiple people involved in her care. There's an admin team. There's a chain of command. I just loved that it was this whole community that would then be there for my child and in a better way than even I could be. They had the structure and curriculum and everything built out. So I fell in love with the concept of it. And I thought, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send her here, no problem. Decision made. And so when I sent her there, that's when I was able to see over the next couple of years what the facility was like. And I just started to think I could do this better. And so for me, thought, okay, this is what I want to do. Like when I grow up, this is what I want to do. And I became obsessed with it. And I always tell people, I think when you become obsessed with something, you find a way to make it happen.
Mm.
And so I was able to find the facility that I now own. And it's just a with zigzaggy journey, not something that went from point A to point B like a lot of people do. And for me, that was perfect for me because I was able to learn along the way from many different parts of my journey and know that I was heading in different directions to finally end up here with the experience that I've had has been incredible.
Well, there's a lot of I want to dig into your story. So, because the thought of starting like a new business, so there seems to be, and especially with kids, I have kids, like that's a big responsibility, right? To take care of other people's kids. And it seems like a very big project, right? Like learning to manage people, learning to make sure you meet all the requirements. Was that intimidating? How did you get past that? How did you learn? Because had you managed people before that point? Like going from probably like an individual contributor or to then owning something that requires a lot of responsibility and so that's a big
Yeah.
shift. So tell me more about that.
So, and most people I feel like you do, where they're like, how did you, what? Like, this is,
Yeah, 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 because it's a big deal.
it is a big deal. And honestly, I think I went in a little naive and that helped me in the long
Sure,
run. I
sure,
just knew what I wanted to do. I was so hyper obsessed with the fact that I wanted to provide the kind of service that I wanted as a mom. I wanted something that was, of course, focused on my children, but a lot of these childcare center owners are older. It's a big undertaking. And so they're usually grandparents. And I don't know about you. I love when my mom watches my kids. It's very helpful for me, but I wouldn't want her raising my kids. I feel like at this point, we have learned so much through research about discipline, about nutrition, about
sure,
the way that their brains are wired and the way kids' brains work, that it was really important to me to bring that to the table with what I was
sure,
providing facility. So for me, and the other part of that was the experience. I wanted to provide an experience for working moms because we go through a lot mentally. There's a lot of lack of support out there. And I just knew that as a childcare center owner, I could provide working moms with more community and more support and more understanding and empathy because I was also one myself. And
sure,
so that was a big part of what I want to do. So I was so hyper focused on what I wanted the results to be that I almost didn't think about how I was going to get there. I was actually pregnant with my son when we bought the facility. So I was 5 months pregnant in an industry I had zero experience in. I just knew that I wanted to provide this space the way that I wanted to provide it, and I was going to figure it out. And I think being that naive helped me because I did. I mean, I figured it out along the way, but it was something that was a huge undertaking. It just was not what I anticipated. And I had to make several mistakes along the way because of that, with
sure,
my team building, with growing the facility. It was a lot to learn and I learned it along the way, but it took longer than I think I would have anticipated because
sure.
I had anticipated the hurdles that were going to come along the way. And we actually, when I bought the facility, it was just a few months before COVID hit. So I gave birth to my baby, COVID hit. So it was a lot. But honestly, COVID actually helped me in the long run, I think, because the one thing that it did for me was everyone was scrambling during COVID, right? No one
Mm,
knew what their policies were going to be. No one knew how to run a childcare center in this pandemic. So for me, I got to dig in and be like, as a mom, what do I want? So I'm not listening to
mm,
corporations. I'm not listening to franchises. I'm listening to my heart and soul telling me as a mother, what am I wanting from my childcare facility during such a trying time where people are just unsure of what's going to come next? People are scared. People need the help, but don't know who to trust. So I followed that and was able to, I think, build a good culture based on that with my clients. But of course, had to work along the way with my team because it was a hiring crisis for a
Oh my
while. So it was
And
definitely a lot.
yeah, no, I could imagine. COVID was a lot for everyone. And so starting a business, a new business, must have been very challenging. I want to go back to okay, you bought a facility that was already a childcare center. Is that right? And then
Yeah.
you revamped it basically.
Yes.
So
So
did
the
you?
whole thing,
Yep.
sorry.
Oh no. So you bought this new facility and even before that. So someone is wondering, like, how did you do that? Like, how did you go buy a facility? Right? Like that seems like a big deal. Did you have support? Did you have savings? Did like you bought this, you took a leap of faith, right? Like I think a lot of people assume people do it alone. And
Right.
what I have found is that there's always like support, a safety net there
Yes.
before taking these big risks. And I think I feel strongly about highlighting that because I want people to get the full picture and
Yeah,
really understand that no one does it. Most people don't usually do it just fully alone. So, do you
that's
mind
right.
sharing that? And
Yeah, I'm honored to share that because for me, and I know it is a privilege. My story is a privilege for how I got here because I was able to use my family's support. So it was definitely something that I had to convince them on. So my dad is actually a partner in the business with me. So he came in with me. He was not excited about it first. I was like, hey, I think I want to do this. And he was like, that's stupid. Like,
no,
what?
no.
He's like, "You don't know anything about this." And I'm like, "I get that." So we had a lot of back and forth, but my dad has always been, my biggest supporter and the person who's believed in me the most. And my mom also on this one, she was plugging him along too. She's like, you have to go in with her. So my mom actually believed in me in this venture too. And so for me, because I did not have the funds by any means to be able to buy a childcare center. So thankfully, my dad came in and helped me out and partnered with me. And he was actually the only reason that we were able to survive through the pandemic as well, because when the pandemic hit, so we're licensed for about 196 kids. And when the pandemic hit, we had 4 paying kids in the buildings.
Oh
So
my
that
God.
wasn't even enough to keep the lights on. It's an 11,000 square foot building. So thankfully, I did have that support and that help through him. I have been able to, over the years, pay him back. So it was not,
Congratulations. That's
that was, thank
huge.
you. Thank you. That was really wonderful for me. So I've been able to do that, but I couldn't have done it without his support. So I know a lot of people use friends and family to be able to fund their business ventures. For me, that's the route that I took as well, but definitely did not do it alone. Also had my husband's support. He works a corporate job and someone needed to help take care of the kids while someone's running a business. So it has been a team effort for sure, but
Mm.
financially, I was able to use my family's help.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being so open about that. Yeah. No, and then like when you started the business, did you keep your employees? Did you start hiring? I imagine that must have been tough during the pandemic. Like, how did
Yeah.
that whole process work?
Yeah, so that was really interesting when I first came on board. So the facility that existed there was honestly mismanaged. It was neglected.
Sure.
Frankly, it was very unattractive to look at. They just had really forgotten about it. The ownership was offsite, they were hands off. And so for me, I came in and I saw that as an opportunity. There was definitely an opportunity to improve the appearance of the school, improve the
Mm,
curriculum, improve the customer experience. Like it was basically like starting a brand new school. And they had had teachers there that were there for the whole time they owned it, 12,
wow.
15 years.
Wow.
That can sound good, but when you have owners that are hands off and a facility that's in a business that's not running quite up to its potential, it's because people have gotten used to their own way of doing things and probably built bad
Mm,
habits. And so
mm,
trying to change their minds and get
that
them
makes,
on board,
yeah.
like this is what we're going to do now. This is how we're going
Yeah.
to change things and basically create a whole new school. It wasn't a good fit. So there were a few teachers that were, kind about it and they were like, this is not a good fit for me. And I was like, likewise, we parted ways nicely. There were a few that, left not so nicely, but I had
Yeah.
to change the entire staff. So
Sure.
went through and over time changed over the entire staff. What did happen was when COVID hit, we furloughed everybody for about 6 weeks. And then
Mm,
when we came back, I was able to kind of nitpick and be like, okay, well, we're going to bring back these people because I couldn't bring back everybody. I just didn't have the clients to support that. So I was able to kind of build off the team that I trusted the most and the people that I felt were bought into the mission the most and bring them back and then start to build more from there during COVID and during the hiring crisis, which I learned a lot about building
Oh
a team.
my gosh.
But yeah, we went from probably, I think we had about 6 people employed after the pandemic hit, and now I have about 35 people that are on my team. So it's been fun for sure.
Wow.
But definitely had to change every single thing. The only thing I didn't change about the business was the name. And honestly, Lupe, I was just lazy. I was tired. I was doing all this stuff. I was pregnant, like about to give birth. And I thought, we kept going over names, like, what should we name it? And I just thought, you know what, forget it. We'll just keep the name. The name's fine. It sounds great. I'm not creative anyone when it comes to that. And so we kept the name. The only thing I will recommend if anyone is out there trying to start a business and buying an existing business, you will bring their reputation with you if you keep
Mm.
the name. So that was something I had to work hard towards too. I accidentally, or not accidentally, but I ended up having to keep their Google reviews that were not so stellar from the ownership. So that was something that I had to tackle and a mountain that I had to climb as well. But now I have like over 100 5-star reviews. So I don't want to get rid of those. So we're keeping the name. But that's really the only thing that is the same. The entire facility is remodeled, staff is completely different, curriculum is brand new, everything is different. So it's a completely different school.
And how did you go about figuring out curriculum, figuring out how you go about running it? Like, did you take classes? Was it just like you start and you figure it out as you go? Like, I could imagine. I mean, this is a new venture for you. You hadn't worked in a facility like that before. So tell me about the learning curve. How did you manage it?
Yeah,
How did you do it? Because that seems like a
it
lot
was
of work.
lot. It was a lot. And so for me, one of the first things I did was read up on childcare licensing rules because it's a thick, but I was like, I understand this. So for me, that was something that I went through. My rep, who was actually, because you have to go through multiple rounds of childcare licensing coming out to give you a brand new license. So they have to
Okay.
inspect the facility, inspect how you're doing things. So we went through several rounds of that. And I actually used my inspector to my advantage in the sense of I would walk through with them, like even through all the little things that maybe I wasn't understanding, and they would help me. They're
Hmm.
to help you. Some people think of like licensing inspectors as people who are against them, but they're actually there to make sure that your facility is operating as to what it should be, and keeping the kids safe and healthy. And that's the number one thing. So I was able to use that to my advantage, asking questions along the way and almost pretty much memorize the whole thing. So that was something that was helpful. And then after that, we actually have some family friends that own some facilities. So I was able to kind of ask them questions as we
Hmm.
went. They own corporate facilities though, so there's only so much that they can share with me. So, and also wanting to do things differently than the corporation, I also kind of
Sure.
had to come up with things on the way. So it was just a lot of research, a lot of time. I did, after some time, end up enrolling with a consulting company, or like they provide education for childcare owners on the
Okay.
marketing side. I had to do a lot of research, and I brought on people that could help me as well to learn and understand the industry, because it was a huge venture to be able to take on and know what to do. But I will say one of the big things for me that really, really helped me was always keeping in mind as a mom, what do I want from my childcare facility? And I feel like that's what's differentiated us over the years, and we've been able to build up to full classrooms and get to where we are today, is because I never let that falter. I was like, I know that as a mom, how I want to feel and how I want my kids to feel and how I want them to be taken care of. And so how do I make sure that that's coming through? And a lot of times in most childcare centers, or in any of them, I was able to find that part. So I did have to kind of find ways to implement what I wanted to bring to the table while learning how the industry actually works on the back.
Mm, mm. And was there any moment where you felt like giving up, or were you so sure about the dream that you just kept going, even in the
That is a
lows?
great question. Of course, I think you always kind of, as an entrepreneur, like, let's just burn it to the ground and start over. There's always a level of that. But actually, so when the pandemic hit, and I told you we had like 4 kids in the building, we weren't even paying the electricity bill without help. And thankfully during the pandemic, small businesses did get a lot of financial help, which was great. But for me, as we were going along, there was a level of fighting tooth and nail for attention from parents against these corporate centers and against all my competitors. I had so many competitors in the area. And so We actually, so my dad, I told you, is my partner, and he was like, I think we need to bring on a franchise. Like, I think we need to bring
Mm.
on that can take over because the franchise name is going to go farther for marketing. We got to get people in the school, you know. And we actually had meetings. We had meetings with a particular franchise, which I had liked early on. And we had these meetings. They checked out our facility, like they flew people out from their corporate office to come look
Wow.
at it. And I was like, look, I get it. I know we are struggling and I know we are at this point where this is make or break, but I believe so strongly in what I want to do. And I can't
Mm.
that if a franchise comes and takes over. You know, I want to be different than the franchise. I wanted
Mm.
to offer different things in the franchise and provide that experience that I knew in my head and my vision that I wanted to do. And if I had a franchise take over, it would have probably been a much faster process to make money. It would have saved us, I'm sure, in a lot of ways, but
Sure.
it was not the vision and it was not what I wanted to bring to my community and for the parents. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I fought against that quite strongly. And I was like, just give me so I mean, as he was an investor and a partner, and he obviously didn't want to be losing money left and right. So I talked to him and I was like, just give me like a year or so, let me work on this myself before we start asking for help in that way, because I didn't want to lose that opportunity for
Mm.
control and for building what I wanted to build for families. So thankfully, it started to pick up. We were able to come up from there, but it definitely was something that we considered. I stayed up many nights being like, should I
Mm.
do this, pass it along? But it wasn't the dream and it wasn't the goal. And so I stuck with it.
Wow. I'm sure that was tough, right? Like,
Doubted my decision every hour. I was like, should I do it now? Should I do it now? Should I do it? I don't know. Should we do it? It sounds much easier than it was. It was very difficult.
Mm. How long did it take to get from 4 kids to when you had enough kids to keep the lights on?
Oh, wow. So for just the lights, we were probably it took about a year. I think it was good because around the end of 2020, going into the beginning of 2021 is where people started trusting childcare centers again and work started opening back up. Even though the pandemic was still going strong, people were starting to come out and enroll. So by the end of 2020, I think we had 24 or 25 kids. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
It was special, but we had coming from January to April, we had about another 40 kids signed up to
Wow.
start. And so I was super, super excited about that. And then at the end of January was when we had that first ice storm. And
Yes, I
my
remember
entire
that storm.
building flooded. Yes. So
Oh,
we
no.
had a pipe burst.
So we're in the Dallas area, and
Yes.
in January, early February, maybe, I think it was like around Valentine's Day, we had this horrible storm, ice
Yep.
storm, and there were rolling outages, power outages. Some people lost power for days. I mean, it was freezing. And so then you had a water incident, or what was it? Oh my God.
We had a pipe burst. So the pipe froze because obviously, like in Texas, the infrastructure does not allow for that kind of cold. And we didn't anticipate that. I put like covers on my hose faucets and stuff, and I dripped the faucets. It was not enough. I mean, we were hitting back then. I don't remember what the temperatures were
They
well
were,
below like eight
it
or
was
9 degrees
cold.
at that
Yeah.
point. It was crazy. So we did have a pipe burst. The fire department called me, and the roads were iced, and we had to just get on the road and get out there. So the fire department called me. And I remember opening the door to the building and stepping in. I had boots on. And I stepped inside and just water. And I sat down and sobbed like a child, like crying so hard. I didn't even know. But it was because all I could think was we have 40 kids enrolled. And the thing about childcare, it's not like, a doctor's office or a haircutting place where you can be like, hey, I'm just going to reschedule you until the facility is up and running. This is like people need the care. Like Monday morning, they need you to be able to open up for their kids. And if you're closed long enough, they're going to find other care and they're not going to come back. So for me, I was like, if I deny these 40 people, like that's it. How am I going to do this? And so, but thankfully we were blessed. We were able to just close for one day. We got, I
Oh my
called my
God, just one day?
one day. So we were closed throughout that week. We had people working on everything, which was great. And then we closed an extra day after the ice storm, and families were pretty understanding, which was great. But I sobbed for a while. Then I got on the phone. I called my dad, told him what was going on. And he's, my dad's seen everything. Being an entrepreneur for so long, he was like, okay, he listened. And then he was like, okay, here's what you're going to do. And I was like, okay. So, he helped me through that. And so we got on the phone, got people out there. We had teams thankfully working overnight to be able to get things up and running again, get the school cleaned up. So yeah, we only closed down that one day. And then after that, nobody pulled out of
Oh
enrolling.
my
So that was
gosh.
amazing. So yeah, so we hit about We were at about 60 something kids by the middle of that year, which was really nice. And we were able to afford to keep the lights on and pay for the food. So that was good.
And how many kids are enrolled now?
We have about 150 right now, which is really great. We're licensed for 196, which is like when they come out and they measure everything and they're like, you can fit 196 kids in this school. For me, I would feel most comfortable not stuffing a kid into every corner. So for us, our full capacity would be around 165 or so. So we're pretty
Okay.
much on, which is nice.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, for someone listening who's listening to your story, what would you want to tell them if they have a dream about or they think about the situation that they would like to solve, right? What would you want to say to them?
Well, cry it out for sure if that's what you need at first. But then you gotta, I think mindset is everything, right? Because the next year, actually, so just to add on to that story to answer your question, the next year, the following year, 2021, we had another ice storm. And I think that one was in December. And I tried to do everything I could to keep the facility, and we still had another pipe burst.
Oh
So
no.
it a little bit earlier, so the whole building hadn't flooded, just half of it. But it was Christmas Eve, and I remember I went out to the facility, and again, you see the ceiling leaking, the whole ceiling caved in. It was a whole thing. Remember, I looked at it, I was like, okay, and I got to work. I was like,
Mm,
think about it, just knew the steps I took the last time, got to work, called my family because it was Christmas Eve, so it's hard to get contractors out there. My whole family showed up with like brooms. My brother-in-law
oh
stopped
my
by,
God.
and he got those little things that you push water out with. Like we had every single person in my family that was there just cleaning up the water, cleaning up the school, getting the stuff outside. And I remember we have a selfie from that day and we're all like laughing, we brought in Chick-fil-A and it was a fun day, but it was all mindset. The same
Mm,
exact thing happened to me a year before that and I was wrecked. But the next time I realized, okay, get your mind right. And it's okay to cry for a little bit, but just try to think about what you want to get on the other side. Don't
mm,
lose sight of that vision. And that's why I know that we talk a lot about the vision in entrepreneurship, but it really is, it's the driving force. It's the
mm,
answer to the questions. It's your Bible, it
mm,
should be what guides you in every section of what you do, in every decision that you make, and in your mindset. If I
mm,
think you need to stay strong. If you started a business with a vision in mind, that should be everything for you. And so when you're down or when you're having a hard time or you're not quite reaching where you want to go, I mean, I've been there like 1,000 times now, but just keeping in mind why you started in the first place and what you want to see on the other side of it, I think is so important. Mindset
mm,
is.
mm. And how do you keep your mindset up? Like, what do you do on a regular or anything at all any practice that you do to help you with your mindset?
Yeah, I think the more you practice, the better you get at it, right? So
Mm,
now it's not even a thing for me. I'm going to think positive. I'm going to think about what's coming next and I'm going to aim for the stars. I think being able to talk yourself out of certain toxic thoughts that I'm sure that we all have. I haven't learned that part on motherhood yet, but an entrepreneur is better at
it's
it.
tough.
It's tough. It is tough. So I think just recognizing and being grateful. I think gratitude is the number one way
Mm,
to change your mindset in any situation because there's always something to be grateful for, whether it's a difficult time, whether it's something, there's always something to be grateful for. Even if everything is falling apart in one aspect, like there's got to be something you can find gratitude for in another aspect. So I think focusing on what you're grateful for is the number one way to approach how to have a more positive mindset and how to move forward because there's always something, right? Even if my building has a leaking roof and the ceiling is caving in, my kids are safe at home. Other people's kids were safe at home when this happened. So
sure,
I'm so
sure.
grateful that even if it had to happen, that it happened in a way where everyone's safe and healthy and happy. A building you can fix, the people were what mattered. And so I think in every situation, just keeping in mind what it is that you are grateful for is going to get you so far. And the more you practice that, the better you get at it and the
Mm,
faster you get at it to the point where now it's like, I mean, there's still days, but it's easier to wire my brain to
sure.
be like, wait, we're grateful for this. We're going to think about this part and not about the bad part. We're going to align ourselves to make sure that we can fix the problem here while still being grateful for what we have. And the more you do that, the better you get at it.
Mm. Oh, I love that. And what you're referring to is really a neuroplasticity,
Yes.
which, yeah, if those listening, if there's someone who hasn't heard of it, it's this concept that we can like rewire our brain at any point in our life. We can create new neural pathways. It's like a muscle. The more we exercise it, the faster the connection gets. So it sounds like you were practicing the gratitude, practicing looking for the positive, and it
Yes.
started kind of creating those neural pathways where you're able to do that a little quicker now.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I've seen that modeled before, which is why it made it a little bit easier for me, but I do feel like it's so important. I think the brain is a muscle just like anything else, and you can do that. You can come out of it and think better. But yes, neuroplasticity is the exact word that I was looking.
Thank you so much for being here today. Where can people find you? Where can people follow along? Where can people, if there's someone interested in the area who wants to learn about your facility, your
Sure.
center?
So with Windhaven Academy, it's called Windhaven Academy in Plano. It's one of the suburbs of Dallas, in case someone's listening from out of town. But we are off of Windhaven and the Tollway, and our website is just windhavenacademy.com. So all of that is there. I'm also now in the process of coaching and consulting female entrepreneurs to be able to grow their businesses and gain the time freedom that I think is so important in business. So for that reason too, then you can find me at AssiaMahmood.com. And then my Instagram is a great place to find me. That's where I meet a lot of people. We actually met through Instagram. So,
Yes.
so that's a great place to find me. It's just my first name dot my last name, Assia.Mahmood, ASSIA.MAHMOOD. And that's the best place to start. And I love doing coffee chats with people if you're, considering sending your kid to even my school or even another school. I love helping people find the kind of school that fits for them if they're not in my area. And if you're a female entrepreneur looking for some help or support, or even just a shoulder to cry on and someone to talk to, I'm here for that too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. This is lovely.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you taking the time and having me on. I love sharing my story, but it's definitely a fun one to talk about. So thank you for allowing me to share this with your listeners.
Thank you so much for listening to this show. I hope that you found the episode helpful. And if you like the show, please subscribe and don't forget to rate and review. I'd also love to connect on Instagram. Send me a DM. I'm at Lupe Prado Coaching. I'll talk to you soon.